Thank you so much for joining us for Workshop 86, the role of citizens informing and maintaining e-government. I'm here today joined by panelist Asha Abinala, founder and CEO of Tech and Media Convergency, Florian Marcus, head of sales and partnerships at Cybernetica, Noha Abalbaki, instructor at the Pan-African Youth Ambassadors for Internet Governance, Dr. Adel Abel Sadek, director of the Arab Center for Cyberspace Research, and Pei Chin Tay, senior policy advisor on government innovation at Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. To kick things off, I would like to pose our first question relating to how we can most effectively create channels for citizen participation in the design of e-government systems while still addressing security concerns. So the way that this panel will work is ideally as a round table. So panelists are going to engage in conversation, and we'll leave time at the end also for questions from the audience and input or thoughts on what we shared. So without further ado, if anyone would like to start by addressing that first question.
I mean,
Okay.
oh, that's weird. Considering the very square nature of this table, we will try to make it a round table. We'll do our best. So, I guess if we want to talk about secure participation of citizens in all echelons of digital government, or what I would prefer to call a digital society, we need to talk about secure digital identities, which are universal, so that I can be sure that when I am logging into my bank or into my digital state portal, that the government actually knows who it is talking to as well, and that I get the services to which I am entitled. So to make it more personalized as a service provision for me. And then also based on that, data exchange, of course, is super important, that you have a secure, decentralized data exchange network where all the different government authorities can talk to each other and exchange data to provide the services that you deserve. But beyond that, I think I would leave it to my participants first, and then potentially chime in if we go into further details.
Great. So on that first question, how we can effectively create channels for citizen participation in the design of e-government systems while still addressing security concerns. Noha, do you want to talk about youth involvement?
Yeah, thank you, Sienna. I'm Noha Abdelbaki for the record. So youth are the main users of, they are the primary users of any tech solutions or any digital tools provided for them. So we are the first responders, the ones who influence other age groups to use these tools. So if we gonna tackle the security perspective of it, it needs to be done through secure channels, not necessarily social media. Even if it's done through social media, it needs to be done maybe anonymously or by using multi-factor authentication, or just to verify that it's not scam. Or like in Egypt, we have verified accounts for each ministry or governmental body on all social media channels. So as youth, it's our role to raise the awareness for the other citizens on how to communicate effectively and securely with the governmental bodies through the available channels. For example, in Egypt, there is also a hotline where you can call the the Digital Egypt initiative and raise your concerns or open a ticket with them. So it's not only through social media. But yeah, we need to raise the security precautions when we communicate with the governmental bodies. Thank you.
Now jumping to Asha, I'd love to hear your answer on question one as well, bringing your perspective. You can hear your own voice through the headsets for everyone who wonders why we're taking them off.
I love the fact that the feedbacks are complementary, but for me, I would like to remind, when I look at my country and the state of development where it is, the first channels will be creating now those platforms and to make sure that proper channels and platforms understand that there is this mechanism when the mechanism is being created. Because we now have a state where the government is creating mechanisms to bring people on board, not necessarily strategically focusing on different groups, but just generally. So the first step would be creating platforms for the youth and citizens to be interested in and understanding why it is important for them to engage, and also entice in a way that we can reach where our fellow participants are, that now they can create a community of youth who can sort of bring other people or other youth on board in the peer group to be able to use the e-governance systems. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we've had some technical difficulties, but I'm hoping that Pei-Chin, are you online with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I'll repeat the question again, but we would love to hear your response to question 1. How can we most effectively create channels for citizen participation in the design of e-government systems while still addressing security concerns?
That's great. The audio works on my side. Hi, everyone. Sorry I can't be there with you in person. I hope you're all having a great time. So I'm Pei-Chin from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. We do a lot of research around e-government. And I think technology definitely brings a lot of opportunities for civic engagement now, because it really does reduce barriers to scale and creating kind of digital feedback loops that are really important for policymakers. There are a number of online tools these days, such as government portals, e-petition platforms, systems, and so on. All these different tools allow citizens to voice their opinions and to contribute to decision making without physical barriers, which is a key challenge in some of the countries. And governments are also developing and launching open data initiatives and using technology to release data publicly. And this really empowers citizens to be able to access data, to be able to analyze, critique, and to hold public officials to account. So in terms of the actual channels, I think we need to leverage on technology to ensure that there is inclusive input, and to create platforms that would allow citizens to provide input anonymously, and or securely. So I think Polis is an example of a really popular consensus generating platform that crowdsources ideas from the public. And bearing in mind that a lot of social media does have that polarizing effect, Polis is there to help to generate consensus, and this has actually led like Taiwan to help policymakers in issues such as how do we regulate Uber and so on. I think in addition to security and privacy, I think generating consensus is a really important part of that journey. And I think encouraging citizen participation is one side of the equation, but equally is helping policymakers to make better decisions and to achieve regulatory outcomes.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Dr. Ardal, do we have you online as well? Great. Thank you for joining us virtually. We would love to hear your answer to question 1, how we can most effectively create channels for citizen participation in the design of e-government systems while still addressing security concerns. And for everyone in the audience, Dr. Ardal will be speaking in Arabic, and Noha will be providing a brief translation afterwards.
Okay. Thank you very much for this invitation, because of this subject is very, very important to re-understanding the real network between or relationship between citizens and the government. I will translate into Arabic. أعتقد أن هذه الورشة مهمة، وذلك لأنها تبحث في الأطر التي يجب أن تتوافر في إيجاد قنوات فاعلة بين المواطن والحكومة الإلكترونية وتصميم برامجها، والتي يجب أن تعبر عن قناة اتصال حقيقية وشفافة بين المواطن وبين الحكومة، وهذا من شأنه أن يساعد في عملية تحسين صنع القرار الحكومي وتحسين فكرة الحوكمة أو government governance. ومن ثم فإن عملية تصميم البرامج للحكومة الإلكترونية يجب أن تنظر إلى المواطن باعتباره شريك ومالك وناقد ويمارس حقه الدستوري في رقابة على الحكومة والأجهزة التنفيذية.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Adel. So Dr. Adel thinks that this session is super important. Yeah. Do you want to resume? بتحب تكمل وانا اكمل؟
اوكي
اوكي انا في دقيقة بس.
اكمل؟
اوكي اديني ثواني بس اترجم. To draft the framework of creating secure and transparent channels between communication channels between the citizens and the governmental bodies, and to consider the opinion and feedback of the citizens when designing the tools, the e-governmental tools and services, as it's the citizens' right to be a partner in creating those tools. Thank you.
Thank you for that translation, Noha. Just building off of question one thing that I want to pose to the panelists is, going back to what you said earlier, Asha, how can we build citizen trust in e-government initiatives in places where we don't have these systems up yet, and where this is really a future opportunity and something that we're really having to build from the ground up? How do we introduce this? How do we get stakeholder buy-in? And more importantly, what metrics should citizens be basing their trust in e-government on? So anyone who wants to take that, please feel free.
So I think the first thing that we take for granted is the understanding of individuals. I would say the first step is instead of just going into doing it, first of all, in introducing it to the citizens by having a matrix of their understanding, their perspective, if they are positive, if they are negative, because I think that is the best way of introducing a new aspect into the community, especially when it has to do with technology. You know, sometimes as the government, when they bring on solutions, they bring on initiatives and introduce it to the communities, they know that the government have decided. They don't feel like they are part of it. So the first step would be you have to make sure that the citizens are engaged. And I know sometimes it's very confusing when you talk about citizens. We are, as Tanzania, we are over 65 million in population, and the active internet users is just 35 million. So people who've registered. So when it comes to active, you might find it's lesser than that. So how do you reach all these participants? Then we go to the next step: identify the stakeholders. Which stakeholders, which platforms has the target audience you're reaching? In most cases, sometimes we tend to forget maybe the religious centers. You know, religious for us as Tanzanians, and I think in most communities, religion is a very important aspect. If you could find ways to find youth through religion, especially as maybe when it comes to whether it's mosques, whether it's churches, you find the youth who would reach a larger number of youth. I think that's a plus. When you go to universities, you go to CSOs that work with the youth. I think that's the best way. So how do you reach there? You do a stakeholder mapping. You just don't draw your line. You just don't draw a list and say, as long as we've reached this category, then that is fine. The key metrics, going to the key metrics, it should be, you need to identify a group which, by the time you've done engaging with them, you can measure their understanding, their influence, their interest. And that is very easy. We have social media right now. If the citizens are not talking about it, if the youth are not talking about it, they are not aware. Because if they are aware, they will in one way or another, whether it's memes, whether it's joke, however way they will do that. The other challenging thing is we consider research very, very academically. And I know we have a PhD on board, but when it comes to research, usually it's just taken something like you just have to go to the academic, have a study on something and shelf it. How can research be incorporated in a way that it could be friendly and guide the overall process of engagement? So maybe by now I'll reach there. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could take it from there. Thank you very much for bestowing a PhD upon me. I'm just a student for now. But yeah, actually, one of my research projects that we just finished up is called eGov for Youth. You can Google it as well. We just published an over 60-page report. It's been very fun. Basically identifying how youth actually want to be interacting with the government. And what we found extremely low interest in was outreach via social media, because youth don't want to be talked down upon. They don't want, I don't know, economic ministry for kids version on Facebook or something where they sort of speak to everybody like they're 15 years old. The second thing, what you already mentioned as well, was that citizens want to feel like they are being heard. And right now that is not the case, because most countries don't account for citizen opinion in their processes. I'll give you a very simple example. If a ministry in most countries decides that it wants to digitalize a service, then usually it will just go ahead and do that. In Estonia and some other countries where public-private partnership is extremely strong, there's a stipulation that says, hey, if there is a project that goes in the direction of service development, you must involve stakeholder groups. If it goes in the direction of e-health, you must talk to patients, to social insurance, to the hospitals, to the nurses, and so on and so forth. So you just have to bake that into your procurement procedures, and if you don't, well, then that's probably where one of the problems lies. And the last point that I would add is, if we expect citizens to care about the services that government provides, then they should probably be good. Truth be told, in most countries that is not the case right now. And especially if we talk about youth being the ones that bring other generations into the fold, well, youth have to be convinced first. And if youth think of stuff like Amazon that predicts the next thing that they want to buy, or on Instagram, within, like, if you scroll through Instagram or TikTok, within 5 minutes the algorithm knows exactly what you want and, you know, what interests you and what you scroll through. And so based on that, they will make recommendations for the next, well, for the rest of your life, actually. And government doesn't do that. Government says, here's a PDF online, print it out, please fill it out, scan it back and send an email. That's not user-friendly. That's like 1998, right? So what we have been doing in Estonia for the last 5 to 10 years is what we call proactive government services, where I can give a personal example. We have a baby daughter. She's almost 1.5 years old. She was born. She got a personal code, like a citizen's number, the day that she was born. Her citizen's number gets connected to my citizen's number and the one of my wife, because we are the legal guardians, the parents. And then the next day we get a notification on the state portal that says, congratulations on the birth of your child. We know that by our own laws you are entitled to child benefit payments. To which bank account do we send the money? There is no more application, there is no more searching for the right authority, blah, 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 blah. So it's about trying to not even copy the private sector, but just get a tiny bit closer than we are at the moment, because government will always be slower than private sector. It has to be, because of ethical guardrails. That's fine, but we don't have to be 20 years behind. That's a quick thought from my side.
For that response. Would anybody else like to answer this question? I think we have time for about 1 or 2 more responses before we move on to our next question.
Yes.
Feel free to go ahead, Dr. Adel.
Yes. Thank you very much for this information. I think if we wanted to have a good, effective channel to design the e-government system, I think we can take in our consideration many aspects, such as the e-government system should be cope up with the national need and what is their people need to have, or what is the real hopes, real needs to development in the future. Also, I think there is also a very important item in this, how to know the challenge. What is the challenge we have? What is the opportunity? I think it is very important to have a good solution to solve our problem, to connect with the citizen, to apply e-government. So we are now to transfer from e-government or e-government to smart government. I think it is very important to have a smart government, to have ability to use the many of technical tools, especially with the rise of AI, to apply with and how to handle with the citizen, and how to use the bots and AI to deal with the citizen. I think it's very important to have a good connection between citizen and the government. Also, I have also other item considered on. We should have one national strategy to e-government or smart government. It is very important because of it is a make a connection and compromise between the all views, all idea, and how to improve our vision to have a development by apply the e-government system. Also, I think also the political support. I think the political support, especially in our developing countries, it is very important because of it easier to be easy the tools and easy to apply, and also it is very important to support the leader to apply the e-government system. Also, I think the e-government and the digital transformation, it is a big challenge to the laws. How to modernize the laws we have. How to make laws and organize the activities on cyberspace, because of it is related with the trust. The citizen, if he have the trust in ecosystem of digital development and digital transaction, it is very important to encourage citizen to deal with the e-government service. Also, especially in our countries like Egypt, we don't focusing on the service by e-government. It is not. It is just a service, not to control on the citizens. I think it is very important to make a comparison between the service by government. It is the duty for the government, or it is the control on the citizen. I think it is very important to have culture of digital transformation. It is very good to encourage people to have their inputs about the service and use many tools. I also the government should be available many tools like focus group, like conference to raise awareness about what is the e-government system.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Adel. We really appreciate your response to that. We're going to have to move on to question 2 now. So question 2 is, what form should citizen participation in e-government take beyond the mere use of e-government systems? And this goes back to what Florian was talking about earlier regarding proactive government service delivery. Florian, if you would like to take this first question.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there are several things that we can do. Number one, what you could have is something like a digital petitioning system. So right now we've got online petition systems all around the world where, I don't know, you enter your email address and then you can sign whatever. The problem with that system that is being used around the whole world is, of course, that you can create many email accounts. Many of us have several email accounts, and we can create 10 more within 10 minutes. And then we can give 10 signatures for whatever petition we care about. And if there is ever a petition that you actually do support, but maybe government doesn't like, they will always be able to put into question like the legitimacy of the number of signatures that you have collected. We have seen this in countries all around the world. This is not one specific kind of government that does this. And the way that we can circumvent this is to say, well, as I said at the start, you all need a universal electronic identity with a digital signature that we can all sort of understand that this person truly gave this signature at this point in time, and you can't hack it somehow. And as a result, the politicians will be able to see that, yes, there are legitimately 20 million signatures from 20 million real people for this kind of petition. So this will be a good start. Number two, some experience from Estonia, perhaps. What we also see being experimented with in other countries at the moment is online voting. So we had a discussion yesterday in another workshop about the topic a tiny bit already as well. In Estonia, you can vote online since 2005 with your electronic identity again. The whole source code for the system is open source. So, if you have any worries about how your vote is being counted or not, then you can check the source code online. And that makes it very transparent for international observers as well. So we have international observers in our country, not just for the physical counting of votes, but also for the digital counting of votes. And then, yeah, last but not least, what I said already about public-private partnership that just forces the companies to get stakeholder groups into the room and ask them how they would like the services to develop. I think that's a good direction.
Thank you, Florian. I think I would also like to offer Pei-Chin the opportunity to respond to this question, since I know this is really in your realm of expertise. What form should citizen participation in e-government take beyond the mere use of e-government systems?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So I think policymakers really need to see citizens as co-creators and not just end users, because there's a lot of complex challenges and governments do not have all the answers. So, especially when we look at, we did a lot of research in the gig economy or digital platform economy, for example. And that is where we really see government lagging behind, because they don't really have the tools to regulate for new businesses and don't really know how to deal with it apart from relying on the tools of the 20th century. So for instance, Uber entered the market in the US in 2011, and it wasn't until almost a decade later that there was any regulation taking place. So I think there are two main things here, which is governments need to gain insight in order to frame the problem in a more accurate manner, especially when it relates to new models, new services, and new challenges. And secondly, they need to have the right tools to be able to approach some of these complex policy issues. And this is where citizens can come in really useful as co-creators of solutions and to contribute ideas and feedback in the development of new policies, perhaps. And this is why we at the Tony Blair Institute have been working with human-centered design agencies on very specific worker-centered projects. Because one of the things that came out as a key challenge in the gig economy is that the workers often do not have a voice. They are often just at the receiving end of new technologies and algorithms that is there to sort of determine their pay and experience and so on, which is why sort of taking a worker-centered and human-centered approach in policymaking has been really fruitful.
Thank you. Would anybody else here, or Florian, would you like to go ahead and respond to that?
Actually, I wanted to ask a question to Pei-Chin. You mentioned at the very start that the citizen needs to be understood as a co-creator, and I totally agree. The question is not whether yes or no, but how. I mean, we have a million working groups and a million multi-stakeholder everythings, and it's all great. And we have a million reports that come out of all the different working groups, and nobody reads it and nobody cares. So the question is, like, how do you actually want to effectuate change in that sense? To give you perhaps also like something that failed in Estonia. We had a discussion in government roughly 10 years ago about whether we can tie the success of or failure of digital service delivery to the salaries of public servants. So guess what? If you make a new tax declaration and you get the budget to develop it as you see fit, but if it's awful, then maybe you should get punished for that. And if it does really well and all of like within the next 2 years, 100% of people do it online because it's so good, then maybe you deserve a raise as well, beyond the regular inflation or whatever adjustment. So even in Estonia, that was shut down for obvious political reasons. But like, how do we make sure that politicians are forced to listen to what we say? Thanks.
Thank you, Florian. And Pechen, I'll give you the opportunity to respond to that if you have any suggestions on that.
Yeah, in the ideal world, we'll be able to force politicians to do the things that we would love to do. But as a sort of, organization that is sort of part think tank, I think there is a number of influencing methods that we use. And in our research, we take, as I said, a very strong sort of human-centered approach. So we engage workers and not just kind of giving them a survey, right? I mean, I think one of the risks here is also the survey fatigue. And people don't really know what you do at the end of that survey and how it's being implemented. So the sort of close feedback loop is often not there. So how we engage workers is really taking the very strong ethnographic approach. You know, it could be even things like, we shadow them because they may not always be able to express the sort of full breadth of their insights in a survey form. And I think it's very important that we take a very sort of open view initially when we're trying to scope up the problem statement, because most of the time we don't know what the problem is, or it could be, there are 1,000 problems staring in our face and we don't really know how to prioritize them. So I think kind of taking a very open approach, especially in the beginning, we use the sort of a double diamond methodology, and then we sort of converge that to identify some of the key challenges, again, together with workers and not just typical stakeholders such as government and private sector. We give workers at the seat of the table when it comes to suggesting solutions together with all these different stakeholders. And this is where the sort of co-design methodology really comes to life, and it really sheds useful insights that we wouldn't be able to uncover otherwise. And then obviously we use these insights to try to influence policymakers.
I think, okay.
In the sake of time, we're going to move on to question 3 now. How might citizens be included as stakeholders in the design of e-government systems to address human rights concerns surrounding the collection and processing of citizen data? And I think we've touched on this briefly, kind of in earlier responses, but I would love to hear a little bit more specifically any ideas or design initiatives that have given greater transparency or even kind of ideas that people are having on this topic.
Yes.
I think the first thing.
Okay.
Going to respond to this one, Dr. Adele, and then we'll move to you afterwards. So, Asha, go ahead.
The first thing we are supposed to do is give them leadership roles according to attributes, like identify them and give them leadership roles. And I would say in most cases, leadership, when it comes to youth, it really has to be something they're passionate about. As in, not because I'm here, I'm at IGF, I go back home, I take my son to be the leader of maybe an initiative which I think there is an opportunity When we talk about responsibility, we normally point fingers at governments. But if in normal cases, if you are here, like if you are in this room, I think you're a step ahead of so many people in your country. So you're a leader already. So as a leader, how are you making responsibilities and decisions to engage the youth? I think that's a very important question, not just the government. But the other aspect I would like to point out is that there are so many global platforms that are there. And when we are in our own countries, we are sort of, you live like in a tortoise. You want to start an initiative about youth, which is a brand new. How do you map out as a country, as a government, as a working group, how do you map out the existing relevant bodies and platforms of the youth and make sure that it is chartered in your organization as well? Because that way, when you start something, when you branch out something which is new in the community, I'll just give an example. There is youth IGF, there is AI, there is artificial intelligence again, there is maybe youth artificial intelligence. So how do you make sure that as a leader you start the same initiative, identifying as a government, you start the same initiative, identify which hub is there or which community is there that can establish that kind of platform which will be instrumental. The reason I'm emphasizing on that is because there are mechanisms. There are youth chapters which are successful in other countries, not successful in other countries, and when you branch out, these youth tend to learn from one another. Like it is easy to fast track their intended goal instead of starting with something entirely brand new. The other aspect I would like to talk about is legal framework. I think we shouldn't take it for granted when the government decides, because a certain leader understands the importance and it is not integrated in the legal framework. Then when they leave, everything goes out, everything falls. So it needs to be in policies. Policies. When you talk about the national ICT policy, the youth have to be there, and I'm really glad that my country, Tanzania, has considered that. When you talk about the digital transformation framework, it has to consider the youth. So I would say those are some of the ways that could be done and are implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to build off of what you just said. Thinking about, codifying protections for user data and ensuring that we have a good legal framework for digital governance. How should we think about digital governance initiatives in states that currently face accusations of human rights abuses and that currently do not adhere to some of the democratic processes that we think about ideally when we think of digital governance? Does anyone want to go ahead and take that, or would you like to respond,
Yeah,
Asha?
I think
Yes,
my country is one of those countries, and yesterday I pointed out that I'm really proud of where we are as a country. The e-governance system is very, very impressive. I'm personally very impressive with the e-governance system. But when you have a government that is very well informed, or it really understands how the e-governance system has to be, and you have other actors that don't understand and don't know their role in it, it becomes very dangerous for the youth and the community at large. So now, the civil society is a very important actor when it comes to propagating human rights. So you want to propagate for human rights, whether it's digital human rights or human rights in general, you really have to have an active civil society community. The active civil society community will hold the government accountable. They'll hold them accountable when it comes to accessibility. Yes, we have very well integrated e-governance system, but have we considered person with disabilities? As one of the gap we're trying to address as TMC, next year we have planned by March to have an analysis of whether the person with disabilities, and especially in technology, we are talking about the blind and the deaf, if they've been considered in the infrastructure of the e-governance which has to be accessed to. We have to make sure that there are mechanisms that can tangibly point out the challenges and propose for solutions. Because now if the government is there and there are no actors, whether private or CSOs that are holding them accountable, they're comfortable. They do anything and everything because they know that they're doing okay and they're doing okay and they're doing right. I would say, speaking for Tanzania, I would say the ICT ministry is one of the ministries which is so very lucky to do whatever they want, because the space when it comes to CSOs, I think it was we weren't as active as that, and I'm really glad that in 2024 we launched the Internet Governance Working Group to address that. So I think that's a very important aspect. But the second one, I wish that we take it for granted when it comes to corporate companies, especially mobile companies or maybe banks. When you have banks and mobile companies that are very close to the government, as in like their bodies, the citizens, it's become very dangerous, because then you just provide data, you just provide information, and it might, as petty as it might seem, somebody can just go there and want to access information about their husband or their wife. Sometimes they can be in danger. Those are things which are so much taken for granted, but they cannot be sorted by the government themselves. So we need an active civil society that makes sure that it has identified the challenges that are into the space, but not only identified, capacitated itself to the extent that it understands what it needs to address. Thank you.
And Noha, would you like to go? Oh, I think we're going to open for questions in about 5 minutes. I think we'll have to get through the conversation. Oh, go. If you would like to ask a question, then we can address, of course. We'll go ahead and pass you a microphone.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to answer your previous question. I'm from Russian Federation. I'm completely not related to the government. But I would like to answer your question about how to protect citizens in not very democratic countries. I would like to say this is very difficult because even in non-democratic countries, digital services might be very well developed. Russia is a rich country that has very well developed state services portal, which celebrates 15 years today. By the way, but the greater example is that if government or ministry is not accountable, they could even randomly, not on bad will, not on a will of abuse their citizens. They could easily violate human rights. The best example we have, that's maybe you still remember, that's COVID passes, which was usually being like QR codes, which was verifying and something like. Once Russian State Services portal decreased by 2 times from 1 year to half year all such COVID passes. It definitely was kind of bug. And actually, it was required for pressurizing for people to extend it back to 1 year. There is not only example of what's doing, and actually, government and ministry and developer are not accountable in any way. Maybe it's reasonable not just to work with civil society, because well, on this and this venue, political activities are not very well accepted. But in this case, you have to be very political active. Also, to push your government. So civil society is not enough. You have to work with your politicians. You have to work with elections. You have to do something to gain power to be able to do this. Thanks.
Going off of what you just said, I want to ask, what do we think the role of the international community, and particularly the international technical community who's providing advising services and expertise to governments as they seek digital transformation, what is their role in kind of ensuring that these systems are not, conducive to human rights abuses?
I may not be saying what you're expecting me to say. I remember very clearly from my bachelor studies in political science, a wonderful course about American democracy promotion abroad, and people not being a big fan of it in some countries, understandably, potentially. I would say that we have to stay the hell out of whatever country is doing whatever it wants. yes, of course, there is a consideration for human rights and so on, but that table can turn very quickly, and then those countries can point the finger at Western countries, which are also not perfect democracies either, in some sense. So I would say what we can do as the technical community, both on a private sector basis, but also non-for-profit and international organizations, is just to give guidance and provide forums like this one to exchange ideas, to share what has worked in our country. It may not work in your country, but it can, and to just use that as a forum for cultural exchange first, and then technical implementation second. The truth is also that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So I'm very relaxed about the conversation, perhaps more than some others might be at the table.
Noha, would you like to share your perspective on this?
The technical community, of course, have a big role to create like innovative and new solutions tackling on-ground problems. Like they can work in parallel with entrepreneurs or civil society organizations to understand the local need or the real problems that need to be addressed and put them in context of the emerging technologies that can be effective in, resolving those issues and offer these solutions for the government to implement. For example, we in Egypt we have a great initiative created by the government in GIZ. It's called the Governmental Innovation Lab, where they encourage entrepreneurs to recommend solutions or create new solutions in the eGov sector. Technical community can help too with like integrating AI, data science, blockchain, and other technologies with these solutions, of course.
Moving now to our last question, in the sake of time before we open up to further discussion and further questions from the audience. How might e-government systems be designed to address the needs of vulnerable members of the population? And this goes beyond just human rights concerns. We're talking about people who I think have different abilities in terms of using e-government systems. People who may be hearing challenged or visually challenged, things like that. Does anyone want to start by addressing that?
I would say one thing before, just because of the last point that you mentioned. One problem for politicians is also that they are often being driven by their populations to adopt the latest buzzword technology. You mentioned blockchain, AI, IoT, blah, blah, blah. Why do we use AI? Why do we talk about the implementation of AI if the data quality of most governments around the world is so bad that AI cannot make any good decisions? You know, trash in, trash out. That's very simple. So, sometimes government is also being driven in some sense in the wrong direction. About accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities and so on. For example, if you think about the healthcare portal, it would be primarily used by people who have trouble reading because they are elderly and so on. So why not make the default font for users over 65 just automatically 10 times as big? Why not make those areas where people with disabilities would be primarily users, why not focus proactive services there? So as an example, if I know that you get a retirement or disability benefit, why don't I make that proactive first, so that you don't have to apply, that you don't have to go to the bank to cash the check or something, so that you make that as low interaction as possible. So that would be one way that we can do this.
Thank you. I think, why don't we move now to Pachin? Would you like to address this question for?
Sure. I actually had a similar point as Florin around proactive services, because I remember when I was working in the London regional office before this role, and basically the job was around how do we skill up the population, that had a very low literacy rate, and we were always very concerned about the people who were so-called hard to reach. But then we had this conversation with the colleagues. Basically, the hard to reach people are the people who need public services the most. And these are people often categorized as low income and those who have disabilities or very low digital literacy or living in remote areas. And they often encounter barriers that would prevent them from fully benefiting from government programs, such as not having digital ID in the UK or not even having bank accounts and so on. So for them, the government considers them hard to reach, but actually, the discussion basically pivoted the whole point, which is for these people, the government is hard to reach. So therefore, the whole idea of proactive services is really important because we need to reduce the administrative burden on these people. They don't have time to navigate, a web of bureaucratic intricacies. And even sometimes for myself, when I used to live in the UK, it was very difficult to actually understand what I am eligible for and how I apply for it. And I would consider myself to be somebody who is quite digitally literate. So actually, we need to be really radically thinking about that and kind of reducing all these barriers and hurdles, especially for people who need it the most.
Thank you so much. I think we are about at time here now, but I think we have time maybe for one or two questions from the audience to close things out. I see we have someone back here. Let's hear it.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. My name is Matilda Moses Mashauri from the Payag and from Tanzania. I have a question. So we talk about this e-governance and everything, but what are the strategies that we are going to use to engage the youth, especially from the marginalized group, to engage themselves in this e-governance that we're talking about? Because for me, let me tell you facts. I live in Tanzania. I just did a program in Kasulu, Kigoma, and I did a program in Singida, a place where I went to give them about capacity building. I could not even give them, because we do not have the digital infrastructures. So if you start to get this digital governance, what are the strategies are you going to use? And especially for this marginalized group, of course, I want to know, and for it to be sustainable for everyone to use, for sustainable for everyone to be able to engage in it, especially for African youth, mostly marginalized community, completely. Thank you.
I'll pass it off to the panelists. Who wants to take that?
Yeah, for the Tanzanian government, it's very strange. I did say that they're doing very well, and this is an excellent example. When it comes to infrastructure, internet and digital infrastructure, Tanzania is covered by 60%, 60 to 65%. Like it's covered, we're talking about fiber, but the infrastructure is only accessible at 38 to 40%. It's telling a lot that one, the people are not really literate. Secondly, the infrastructure is not there to be consumed by the community. Secondly, the government through a regulator, TCRA, they have a program known as UCSAF. It is intended entirely to reach out to the rural. So I would say, we were talking with this conversation, digital transformation, it started in 2021 when we had the funds from World Bank and EU. We are I would say we are in progress, we are getting there. It's not perfect, but it is something that is being worked upon. The newly launched policies has also identified the intent, and when and the government is they also want to make sure every Tanzanian has a digital identity, and this they wanted by end of 2024, which I know won't work. I think I think they will have to move it forward. So yes, it is not perfect, but something is being done. I wish I could explain further, and we can talk about it because the time is limited.
Thank you so much. And yes, unfortunately, the time is limited, and we are now at time. But thank you so much for that question, and it was a pleasure hearing everyone's ideas and speaking with everyone today.